As a scientist, you ask a lot of questions, but I think also the richness of like a science background, if you will, is that we're okay with holding things in tension with one another. That you don't necessarily throw one out because what other is right, or the other one you've come to a conclusion about. You always have a hypothesis.
Welcome to the Everywhere Podcast, a collection of interviews with leaders and pastors and everyday followers of Jesus who are living into the reality that Jesus changes everything, everywhere. Hey there, I'm Ryan. Welcome to the podcast. Today I have the privilege and honor of talking with my friend Kris Beckert. She is senior pastor of Table Life Church in Pennsylvania, and we have a fantastic conversation about her journey towards faith and the call to ministry, and also the work not only that she's doing at Table Life Church, but also with the Fresh Expressions movement. This is a really enlightening conversation. I think you're going to love it. Let's dive in. Well, good morning, Pastor Kris Beckert. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. We were just chatting about how on your office door it says you're the pastor of fun.
I am. Yes, it's a title I carry with me wherever I go. Was an associate pastor of fun. Now I'm lead pastor of fun. So it's always intriguing to people when they come in and see me.
Fantastic. Well, hey, let's just dive right in. This is a chance for us just to get to know you and your call to ministry, your call to faith, and just kind of what God has been doing in and through your life as a pastor and a follower of Jesus. So what is your coming to faith story?
Yeah, so kind of interesting roundabout. I mean, I know lots of people have almost like come into faith and also ministry kind of second career wise, or kind of the second part after doing other things or trying to do your own way. So let's see, I grew up in the Catholic tradition. So that was an important part of my family and upbringing, like not just like Christmas and Easter type people, which goes Catholic as well as Protestant, but but we attended church every week, and it was just an important part. Got confirmed, all that, went through a lot of those types of things. So it's funny, I don't really remember or have like a time that I didn't believe in Jesus. Looking back, like there wasn't a time that I put him to the side or said like, I don't believe he's the Son of God or anything, but just like didn't matter in my life. More so like it was about going to church, and that's about it, and saying your prayers. And so it wasn't until later, post college really, that I had a couple of tragedies happen with friends, and death. Just, it was really, really awful. That kind of made me angry at God for a period, but it wasn't like I denied him or said he didn't exist anymore or that kind of thing. But it wasn't until after college, and I ended up in Maryland. Well, I studied biology in college. That's my degree, and have always loved science and that kind of thing. And I wound up going for my master's at University of Maryland, except it wasn't like on the main campus. It was at one of the laboratory facilities with environmental science. And so I moved there, like towards, if anybody's familiar with Ocean City is like on the beach side, Atlantic Ocean. So a little bit inland on like the peninsula there is it's called the Eastern Shore of Maryland, with Chesapeake Bay kind of splitting Maryland in two. So that's where I was on that peninsula, and doing study, research, that kind of thing. And what happened was I started to just feel a call to go back to church, or I needed to have more intentionally have God in my life. And so I tried a bunch of different churches in the area. And I have to say that experience has really shaped me and formed me. I've never felt so like an outsider as in that time. And yeah. And so I always remember back to that, about your first experience, especially having come from a Catholic background and not knowing the different things that in Protestant land goes on, and different practices of taking Lord's Supper and prayers, and even the Lord's Prayer being a little bit different. People kind of continuing. And anyway, so I, toured a bunch of different places and really didn't feel like anything really fit or that I belonged anywhere. People were friendly. Some people wanted me immediately on my first Sunday to like be the youth leader for them. And I'm like, I don't even know you. I don't even know what, I never attended a youth group. I don't even know what that is. And
We'll take anybody.
right, we'll take anybody. Yeah, you're young, so it's kind of scary. So don't do that. Don't do that. And so for a while, I just gave up. But then there was a lady at my workplace, because I was doing research as well as getting my master's in environmental science. And there was a lady at the lab facility. She worked in like the business office. And I got to know her pretty well, as well as a lot of other people, because in my professor's office, we were kind of located in that region of the building. So she actually started what I call Fresh Expression of Church. Huh. And she started basically a small Bible study, a prayer group at lunchtime at work. Huh. And invited me to it. And so I went and was with a bunch of my colleagues and people that worked there. And so for a while, that was like my church, and had great discussions, supported each other, built community. And so it was really interesting that was just a very formative part of my faith story. And then from there, so I was a part of that for a number of months. And there was a guy, he was a mechanic. His name is Bear. He still works at the facility too. He's really cool. And he invited me to his church on a Sunday, which was a non-denominational church that I hadn't gone to before or checked out. And it was very different than Catholicism. People wore Hawaiian shirts and went barefoot playing guitar. So yeah. So I was like, wow, this is interesting, but I would say that's where really my faith in Jesus came alive. And I went from I kind of describe it as a spectator watching the game on the sidelines, cheering on, but it really not being a part of anything, to being a player on the field. And that was where, that turn of that faith into a relationship rather than just something I'm participating in, kind of seeing or watching. And that personal faith in Christ really coming alive, and how I saw that being lived out, which mattered in that community. So yeah, so it was there, and I was the only the person from the lab that attended that church, and there were a lot of you would say country folk. It was a rural area, but they really became my friends and family. And and I just saw really God do amazing things, healing in people's lives and relationships through struggles, God's provision, just those kinds of things that lots of times we forget about, that God's still doing.
Amen to that. Well, that makes sense then as to what led you eventually to Fresh Expressions and that whole movement, because that's really what came alive for you. We'll get to that a little bit later, but
sure.
what went from being kind of a full-fledged now part of the body of Christ, living into your faith, really following Jesus, to the call to vocational ministry?
Yeah, so I graduated and was involved in the church. We had this thing called Kids Club on Sunday afternoons that had kids. We went around the community with a van and picked up kids off the street corners and brought them to church, and had a really fun time. Lots of kids that had no church background or anything. And so I was involved in a women's group and lots of other things. Well, I started to just feel very unsettled in the work I was doing. I remained employed there after I graduated and had a full-time job, and was actually doing science communication work, which is really exciting. And it's kind of its own area of work and that kind of thing. And so so it was there that I just started to feel kind of unsettled, and what was this going on? And the funny thing was, just a little background, this non-denominational church didn't support women in ministry. So I didn't know that. And also I didn't know that women could even become pastors, because growing up Catholic, that's not something you do. You become a nun if you're going to go into some kind of holy vocation. So
you were doing ministry at the church, right? You were doing kids.
I was doing those types of kids, but not preaching or being a leader in that. And none of the pastors there were women at all. Yeah, so there was one opportunity that I accidentally preached at a communion service. And yeah, I didn't get in trouble for it, but people really affirmed it. It was kind of, we would do a communion service like on a Sunday night, like maybe once a month, once a quarter, something like that. And it was kind of like laid back, and we do creative things with it, arts and song and prayer and lots of things. And my one friend, like she would do like uh sign language with songs and that kind of thing. It was just really beautiful. So yeah, so I wound up like accidentally preaching, and it was there that I really felt God like tap me on the shoulder almost to say like, you need to, this is what you're like called to do. And not knowing what to do with that, what do you do with that or say? And once again, I never heard a woman preach before either. So so I did go to my senior pastor first, who didn't believe in women in ministry, and he kind of told me to pray about it, go away, in so many words. And but I was still determined. So I went to, we had an associate pastor at the time who happened to be licensed in the Church of the Nazarene, but serving outside the denomination in this non-denominational church. And because of his background and his theology, he supported women in ministry. And I had attended a small group of his previously, so I had that kind of relationship with him before. And yeah, so he started to mentor me and just kind of walk through, what is this calling? Like, let's kind of walk this out, reading books, reading scripture, and things kind of taking off that way. And then lo and behold, like a month after that, he felt called to plant a church. So I went with him to be a part of a launch team, which I didn't know people actually started churches. I thought they were always just kind of there. So yeah, so that was like, okay, we're going to start a church, and that's going to be awesome. And it was, yeah. So then through that was when I kind of entered in our denomination, the process for ordination and licensing and that kind of roll out of a plan. So yeah, so it was very roundabout. Eventually I quit my job, which I had a great relationship with my boss at the science lab. And he was like, what are you doing? What? He's like, this is the first, he never had anybody quit to go to seminary.
That's
before.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah. So,
love that story.
yeah, kind of a roundabout way, but
Oh, it's
exciting
fantastic.
at the same time.
I find it interesting, and I have brothers and sisters in Christ of mine who do also don't, they don't believe in women in ministry, but it's amazing how many women are still doing ministry, even if they're not preaching. So
Right.
it's like, I don't think that jump needs to be that difficult.
Yeah.
The call's the call, like you got gifts. So
Yeah.
also I find it interesting that a lot of people have this struggle of faith and science.
Mhm.
Was that ever an issue for you? Was that ever something you battled or that you had some tension with, or were you always just kind of like, these two things are not against each other,
Yeah, it's funny you ask that because yeah, I mean, for sure I've had questions
Mhm.
and trying to learn things and investigate things, looking at like, Genesis and the creation stories and what's going on there. Is this, just, and especially coming like the church that I was a part of, like, tended to be more towards a very, literal interpretation of everything. Just given their stance on women ministry and that kind of thing. So so I guess for me, like exploring those things, like as a scientist, you ask a lot of questions, but I think also the richness of like a science background, if you will, is that we're okay with holding things in tension with one another. That you don't necessarily throw one out because what other is right, or the other one you've come to a conclusion about. You always have a hypothesis. And so in that you do conduct experiments or investigations to determine whether that hypothesis can be supported through what you've tried or not. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just whether or not you can support that direction. But in that, you learn lots and lots of things, and you may actually uncover, as a lot of scientists have, lots of very, very important things that through that investigation that had nothing to do with your original hypothesis. You may talk about, well, I hypothesize that jellyfish are always going to go towards warm water and warm salty water instead of cold fresh water. And you investigate that, and you might find, oh yeah, they in salty systems they tend to gravitate towards that thing, but temperature doesn't really have an effect. But temperature does this to them, and I think that's kind of been my experience with scripture, and and just in a faith background too, is that and we're constantly learning and growing, and that's okay. That just because I believed something 10 years ago, for me at the time, that's what I investigated and explored and seemed to be correct. But that I'm very open now to learning that there may be a different way. And I can embrace both of those things to say, hey, at that time, that's where I was, just as in science and, we would say technology as well. Hey, back in the 80s, we had cassette tapes, and that was the technology of the time. And was that wrong? We didn't know more than that, but I can also embrace the digital technology that we have now. So that's been even just unpacking in faith too, is that I don't feel like that, science and faith are against each other. I feel like they are exploring very, very different questions. And if anything, like my exploration and investigation in science has really affirmed my belief, first of all, in a creator and organization in the cosmos and in the world. And that also things are also designed in a way, and whether or not people believe, I believe it, is by intentional design and by a creator, but they're designed in a way that sometimes they don't work the way they were supposed to. So why is that? Because if everything were absolutely perfect, everything should be working exactly, and there should be no broken pieces or broken DNA or that kind of thing. So there is something wrong with those creative aspects. So lots of food for thought there.
Awesome. Thank you. It's fantastic. So were you in seminary when you were church planting? Was that happening at the same time?
No, we planted before. So I was still working at the lab.
Okay.
And started to take classes before I went to seminary. And so that was the first two years of the church plant. We planted in the building of a dying church, a church that was going to close in the next, however, year, maybe, because they just couldn't afford to stay open. There were about less than 20 people left, mainly elderly. And so we planted in that building with our district. And and that was, very, very, I know there's different models and ways of church planting, and especially this was back in the late 2000s. So, so that was kind of the way that we went about things. And then after that, 2 years in or so was when I kind of made the full jump to say, hey, I'm going to go get my credential coursework and stuff out of the way, moving away for a while, but that was still my home church during that.
Fantastic. And what did you love the church plant process? Was that exciting for you?
I didn't, like I said, I didn't know that people did this. so it's okay, what are we doing? How does this work? A lot of learning on the ground, and but in the midst of that, really seeing how just the faithfulness of God and bringing people together, and people, most that don't know Jesus, and just seeing his grace in their lives and coming into relationship with him. So so it was very unique experience, not really knowing what you're doing but trying things and experimenting, and just being very open to change. And I think that was the kind of richness of that.
Fantastic. And so from that church plant, where did you go from there? What was the next call?
So when I was in seminary, I served at a Methodist church in Northern Virginia. So I actually went to a Methodist seminary. I went to Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C., and it still kept me in the region. And but then I served at Herndon United Methodist Church. Woohoo! Still have great relationships there. Went to my friend's wedding and saw all these people from that congregation again and catching up and all. So yeah, so I was the discipleship director or pastor there. And during that time, our lead pastor actually had to have pretty serious back surgery. So me and our youth pastor got to be co-pastors during that 8 weeks and really lead the church. And it was during Easter, it was during Lent and all. So we had a blast doing that while we're both in seminary and doing our studies that way, but really getting to lead that church. And it was both traditional and contemporary church. So like the robes and candles and choir and all that, as well as like the funky music in the gym with coffee and sitting on stools and, and having conversations and discussions and that kind of thing. So it kind of branch both worlds as, so that was once again, a very formative experience there. And and then I went to plant a church actually in Northern Virginia with the Methodists and serving with them. And once again, with the model of I was on staff at a church and then took a launch team and went and planted that in the building of a church that was dying. So I'll never do that again, ever.
Really?
No.
Oh, why?
No.
Keep me asking.
No, both experiences. Yeah. Just super hard on people. People, even if they're like the existing congregation, we call them the legacy congregation.
Right.
Even if they're like, yeah, we want change, we want young people, we want you to do this, like we give you a blessing. When they start to actually see it, it's really heartbreaking. And there can be just lots of emotions and tension that comes in there out of that place of grief and loss. And it's not about you, it's just about the change and not getting to go back to what was. So just lots of conflict in the midst of that, while you're trying to start a new church, that really a lot of your energy, like all your energy really has to go into like connecting with people, building relationships, reaching people, being in the community. And, and sadly, it can kind of be I hate to say this, but like a distraction to have to also deal with conflict with people that aren't happy that you move chairs or that you're setting up a screen or, and that's just, I think it made it even harder because church planning is as hard as it is. So, so in both situations, really, that's what it came down to. So I don't recommend it if you can avoid that. I know everybody has their own story with that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's vulnerable, but there are a lot of churches that are trying to revitalize and this and that, and it's going to come with natural losses and people feeling like there is a death that has occurred in certain areas, and that can be tough, very hard.
Yeah. And I think, just like through my experience, as well as others that I know that have either coached and on those levels, for what I've seen is if there is a building or a situation like that, then it seems to be better that either the congregation decides that, yes, they're going to revitalize and they themselves are going to do it, or they close completely and a new plant comes in. Like those two seem to have the better rate of success or the opportunity there, just from just a track record. Because others I know that also did the same thing that I've done. Like while some of them are still alive and functioning, they were never off to a good footing when they started.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And so from that situation, is that where you landed at Salem Fields?
Yeah. So then, went back to my denomination at Salem Fields Community Church, which is a Nazarene church, and in the same region in Virginia, just a little bit south. And and that was its own experience, a large church setting, being on staff there as the pastor of innovation and multiplication. That was exciting.
Oh, please
Yeah.
dive into what that means. What did you do as far as your role there? And those words are, for some folks, they're just buzzwords that sound really great and are great on the
Mhm.
title, but you seem like a very doer oriented person. Like, hey, we're going to actually like make this happen. What's
Yeah.
innovation and multiplication actually do? You know?
Yeah, well, it was cool because I really had freedom in starting fresh expressions of church and having people also a part of that. And the fresh expressions of church are forms of church in our community for people that won't come to church.
Okay.
And they can be in different places among different people. Most of the time, they're not led by pastors; they're led by lay people or not ordained people who have full-time jobs or families or other situations. And really deploying them as missionaries to start church where they are. Anywhere from, we had one guy that started that in a CrossFit gym. We had a hiking ministry group. And once again, these are not intended for like fellowship events or for church. It was led by a core group of people that from our church, but the intent was to connect with other people in the community where they are. And so that's what I did, as well as in a different format, outreach events for our church. So they're two very different things. Because a fresh expression of church, the goal is never to get to people to come to your church. You actually form church there. You're church planting there.
Well, okay, all right. So hey, time out real quick.
Okay.
That would, some people would be listening to that and being like, well, wait a second, the whole goal is to get them back to the building, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
How, with that idea then of church, are those that are, let's say, planting these fresh expressions, are they still coming to a weekly gathering at Salem Fields?
Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
so they're doing like this throughout the week, Sunday nights, whenever.
Yeah, we call it like they're tethered, so there's still a connection, but that they have the flexibility to go out and to, but basically we're deploying them as local missionaries.
Wow. Okay.
Or church planters.
Yeah.
But it's going to look different. It's not people sitting in rows, listening to songs, listening to a message. It's different than that. And so they're still connected to the body, but we're basically, just as we would send a missionary to Russia or Argentina or the Philippines, we're sending them to the coffee shop, to the gym, to those places.
That's
and
fantastic. Yeah.
And that's the difference between outreach, which we still need to do, which I did. We did summer movie series, even during COVID. Like, we had drive-in movie series because there's nothing for people to do safely during lockdown and all. And we did different outreach events and connections and activities. And that was all, the intent of that was to connect people, to say, hey, join us on Sunday morning. But that was not a fresh expression of church.
Wow.
The fresh expressions was that different wing of that. So
and how do you launch that so when you were brought on board Salem Fields, was that the intent? Like, they said, hey, this is kind of what we want to see happen, or did they talk with you about, hey, what ideas do you have? You've already seen this movement happening within the Methodist Church. I think this would be good for us to do here. Is that kind of what happened? Or
yeah, I had been in conversation with them, and they're like, yeah, they're, like I said, it was more permission giving than anything. Sure. To be like, yeah, let's try. Like, they saw the need, and this was pre-pandemic, the need to be doing things differently, and the need for change and for ministry to look very different than what it is, because it's not, the current status is not connecting with as many people as it once was, because we've kept things the same. So that was kind of the mindset going into it. But like I said, I did both of those things: the outreach, hey, we're going to do something fun and get people from the community and say, hey, if you need a church, we're here and we want you to come, you're invited. And then also we're connecting with a totally different group of people that forming church in the community in these other places, without the intent of saying, hey, this is not an outreach event for you to come to our church. This is going to be church in this community.
I think a lot of pastors and folks have been doing church ministry for a number of years. I see that as really not really the church of the future anymore. I think it's really the church now.
For
It's just
sure.
how we help people live sent lives where they are
Yeah.
as missionaries. Ooh, it's so unbelievably important. How do you
Yeah.
then, if there's somebody who comes to you and says, I'm interested in starting a fresh expression, is there a
Mhm.
connection between you and that person, ongoing discipleship, talking about how it's going? How does that look?
Yeah, that's where we would say like the tethering comes in. That
Yep.
connection is it's less of okay, go bless it, send it, we're good luck, that type of thing. But we want to be able to celebrate that and report back, hey, what are stories that you're encountering? Who are you connecting with? How can I help you? What do you need from me? And seeing like the pastor more as the coach rather than the player,
Mm,
and that just really multiplies that multiplication effect of the ministry that we're letting people live into what they already do. It's not saying, oh, well, you have to quit your job and go to, like, for some of us it's quit your job and go to seminary and you're going to be a pastor of a church, but for others it's, yeah, you like to do CrossFit, that's awesome, how could God use that to do ministry, and could you begin getting a group together and having a prayer before a workout and then doing a devotion at the end. That's what they do. And they've really built this. And then they've been, or they were getting, collecting items for some community needs for the food pantry, there was somebody that had cancer and they were providing cards, and like they did service events together, and it felt, and then they had a cookout on top of that. And it's like a
wow.
church, right? It just began forming that way. And even what we did, we started a dinner church at the elementary school, which was once again unheard of. That it's
Wow.
public school, totally let us in with open arms and said, yeah, we want families to connect because they're not spending any time with one another. We said, well, can we do something like this and a free dinner? Come and we're gonna have a dinner and a program, and the program is going to be on a Bible story, and we're going to have the kids involved. We're going to do an activity, a craft with that. And we had 180 people show up to this. I mean,
Wow.
it was gangbusters. It was crazy.
This is a
And
one-time event or something that continued?
we began it once a month.
Did it once a
Um,
month with the local elementary school?
yeah. And the
Wow.
teachers would come, the administrators would come. We had the local food bank. They provided no ask, food, like fresh produce bags for everybody that was there.
Oh my word. That's amazing.
So yeah, it was really, and once again, it was just these pieces that came together. We had a conversation and a relationship, and that door opened, and nobody went to there and, hey, we want to do this and you have to let us do this. Like, it was like they came to us, and because we had that relationship and shared those needs.
Praise God. That is
Yeah, it's really
awesome.
looking around like, what is God already doing?
Yes.
Where can we partner with him?
That's so awesome. And so you also were the online pastor, or worked with the online at Salem?
Yeah, I did the digital. Yeah, for Sunday morning, that was my kind of part when I would preach on occasion. But yeah, I did the online pastor.
Yeah. How did you see that develop? When did you start at Salem Fields? You left 2 years ago, right?
Well, I'm now a lead pastor. A year ago, last summer,
Last
was when
summer, and
I
you
was when
started at
I
Salem
started
Field
here.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah, pre-pandemic. So yeah, it was 20, I get my years mixed up. I think it was like January 2019.
And
Yeah.
so you saw your role in the online world just like take a massive turn for the
Oh
whatever
my
when the
gosh.
pandemic hit. Talk about that. Like, what was that like? It almost feels like a lot of online ministry was, I wouldn't say on the side, but it was something that
Hmm.
we valued. It was great. Super glad somebody's doing it. But then it became essential. Like, you know.
Yes. Yeah. And the interesting thing was, I had never been a part of a church that actually had that before I was at
Wow.
Salem Field. So that was a huge
Yeah.
thing. And because we were doing that before the pandemic,
Right.
the church had been doing it for years. And not just, hey, we're just broadcasting the service and that kind of thing, but having like a chat going on there, having prayer requests, And so less of like kind of forming its own campus or community, but still being intentional about that connection. So that was new for me, and just learning that piece. But yeah, you're right. When the pandemic hit and everybody went online, the good news was that we were already structured for that. And we had all the pieces in play. I know a lot of churches scrambled and were trying to figure out how to do it. We didn't have to do that at all, because of, for us, it was more of like the format, like, turning things, like we would record things or do them live in people's living rooms versus on the stage. Okay. Because that's what connected with where people were sitting and being a part of the service, rather than, oh, I'm watching this place that I'm not allowed to go to right now. And yeah, so that was kind of its own piece. But through that, we experimented with some online small groups, and even some, I guess they're maybe not outreach, but connection events. We did Zoom trivia, which was really fun. And people wanted that after the pandemic too.
Oh, cool.
And we had people from everywhere. So we had people not even living in Virginia that were wanting to be a part of our trivia nights, because they were so much fun. And we had people like bring out stuffed animals and wear hats and things. And it was kind of freaky, but everybody needed to do something. And so we did some creative things that way, and just really utilizing those platforms for those connections that otherwise we would have had in person.
So doing innovation, multiplication, pastor of fun. I've been thinking about this, I don't know, probably the last 6 to 8 months or so. Especially, I got 4 kids, and I want their faith in Christ to be vibrant and real and amazing, but I also want their connection to the church to be really vibrant and be able to withstand a lot of the things I know they're going to go through as they get older. I find that we have a hesitation of the idea of having fun at church and really enjoying it and making it something that is exciting and not just a place to be, but a movement, a people, a story, a mission that really engages the whole self. Talk a little bit about the importance of fun and what. Yeah, I feel like God designed the church to be an amazingly fun place and people to belong to. So why talk about why you think we are hesitant to engage in with it that way, and then what you've seen that become, why you value that, it being fun.
Yeah, well, truthfully, I've had people tell me that these are not in church people say that Christians are the most miserable people that they've ever met. And I'm like, oh, no, that's what you see and think, oh my gosh, like it's true.
It is true.
Because the people, they're like, people aren't happy when they go to church. When they come out, they're mean. They go to the diner and they're yelling at the waitress. Like there's no joy. There's no like happiness. There's no kindness. And I'm like, wow, that's really sad. But God, created us, like we should be the most joyful people on the planet, with the hope of the resurrection and the new world and being a part of the new creation and being a part of God's kingdom now. Like, wow, that's like, no matter what, nothing can touch us. Like, that's cool. The whole MC Hammer can't touch this. How did they bring that back? Anyway, but seriously, it's all, that's all part of it. And in Fresh Expressions, we actually have like an arm that's like God at play, and talking about like the importance of play and hobbies. And those are beautiful things and gifts that we've been given. Athletics and art and music, all expressions of the image of God. So why not utilize them and live into them and bless them too? Instead of discouraging people to say, oh, well, no, it has to look like this. It has to fit into our holy box, our religious picture of what things need to be. And, who cares if you don't like it? You got to do it. What if prayer could be like art, using an artist's gifts and poetry. And, I've seen athletes playing to the best of their skill, that these bodies that we've been gifted with, like using that as worship. but not worship of the body or of the paintbrush or of the pen, but worship of our Creator who gave us those gifts. And so we should be, joyful in that. And it's okay to laugh in church, in our worship services. It's okay to have fun events together and play laser tag as adults, and go, like, those are the places that I think, like, I don't know, I experience God just as much in those joyful moments as I do in the times that, hey, I'm in real desperate need or in sadness or that kind of thing. So yeah, so I think we need to be intentional about that, because it's joy. It's not happiness, it's joy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's attractive, I think, to the world around us, that there's a lot of pain and suffering. And it doesn't mean that we deny that by any means, but that we can live into another story that we're also a part of.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've only been up here in the Chicagoland area now for about a year and a half. And one of the things that I have noticed in our church, talking to some of our young adults, I see them on Instagram and on Facebook having a blast, loving life, enjoying it really well. And then they come into church and it's like this different person is there. I have to be more stoic, or I have to be more, just kind of.
Right. That's what holy looks like. Yeah.
Yes, this is exactly. And I'm like, no, I mean, God is just as real and big and awesome when you're having fun, and when you're being you. You need to be you when you walk into here. This is supposed to be the most real time we can have together as a corporate body. And I think having fun, enjoying each other, enjoying God is something that the world desperately needs to see the church do. I mean, my word,
For sure.
everybody else is ripping each other apart and depressed as all get out. I mean, come on now,
Yeah. And that's just, I think it just creates that, like, something that people are like, really, like, just kind of that shock factor, because a lot of times the expectation is, oh, well, you're high and holy and everybody's miserable in church and can't wait to get out, or it's like, oh, woe is me, and that's not something that I would be a part of. Like, if I went to, I play sports, so if I were going to join a team that everybody were like that, like, even no matter how much I loved playing, I'd be like, I can't be around those people.
No.
Like, that's just not something that I want to be a part of. So I think that's the same thing. And I think sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. I know I do. Yeah. And that's where that joy, that's where laughing at yourself, like, I think especially as pastors, being like, hey, you know what? Like, oh my gosh, I really screwed that up. Like, do you believe this? Like, laughing, how crazy is this situation? Like, nobody could come up with this. Like, let's laugh at this stuff.
Yeah.
Because it is. And it's like, wow, that's the body of Christ. Okay, well, we're going to deal with it. But don't take ourselves too seriously in that. And I think that's sometimes that can put us in a place that, we almost put ourselves in the place of God, or that everything rests on our shoulders too. So lighten up a little bit.
That's good. All right, let's get to Table Life Church, right?
Yep.
All right, talk about the call there and leaving Salem Fields and taking this your first senior pastor role.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, the church plant, like, we were still connected to our church, so I still had a staff and leadership and all, but we were still connected. So I was kind of doing a lot of the things I do now. So it's not new, but it is new. So kind of a weird place. So yes, kind of a 1.5.
There you go. All right. We'll talk about the call there.
Yeah. So it really came out of the blue. I was just approached by the district superintendent. Would I consider this church here in Pennsylvania, and met with them, and everything really seemed like a really, really good fit, I think, both ways. And also being closer to family as well in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Philadelphia, so just a couple hours away, which is not bad. And no I-95. Oh goodness, if anybody's familiar with I-95, if you can avoid every like region has their own like road that you're like, I don't need to travel that, I won't. So anyway, so 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 I started here last summer. So still like, on the edge of pandemic times. Actually good friends with the former pastor, and the former pastor before that was on my credentialing board. So
cool.
they both were at my installation service, and so that's kind of neat to have those relationships too. And so I came in and my whole thing is like, this is who I am. Like, we're outward focused. We're going to be doing things in the community. We're going to be experimenting. Things are going to change that way. Like, if that's what you want and you're on board with, then, I'm the person for that. So that's what we've really been doing, is tweaking things and taking things outward, things that we're already doing. We've been doing an outreach event a month on our church lawn outside. And now we have it down to a T that I don't even run the thing anymore. Everybody knows what they do. And we have Fire Pit Fridays,
Wow,
which is super fun. And actually in our district, they had me share. I'm supposed to have like 3 minutes to speak. I want to speak in 90 seconds, but I basically shared, like, we do Fire Pit Fridays. This is what we do. This is why we do it. This is who we connect with, and God's blessing it. And I sat down, and would you believe it? There's like 15 churches in our district that are now doing Fire Pit Fridays.
that's fantastic.
Yeah. And some of them are these little churches of like 30 people that are mainly elderly. And they're like, we can do a fire pit. And
Well, tell me about Fire Pit Fridays. What is it? It sounds like it's self-explanatory, but
it's a fire pit and hot dogs and s'mores and lawn chairs. And we have a bounce house too. So we put Christmas lights on that. And kids come, but and neighbors come, bring their dogs. We just sit on the front lawn and share food and fun. It's really simple, but it's like effective. I've prayed for people, like, it's kind of crazy when you just make yourself available that way. And you just, like, even people driving by, like, they see like, wow, there's stuff going on here. There's people outside. And it's just like, my whole philosophy is like very simple, like, as far as outreach events, very simple, and things that pay for themselves too. Like, everything that we use is all donated from companies, and we have a connection just north of here that gives us all food, candy, snacks, everything for free, so we don't pay for anything. It's kind of cool.
fantastic. And so is this every Friday, or like
we've been doing them every so often. I wouldn't even say once a month. Like, in the summertime is just way too hot, so we did a water fun night outside. We did an Easter event, even though it was like bitter cold outside and crazy. So turning a lot of those things, we do prayer walks around our neighborhood and some of the other towns, just walking, praying for our neighbors. And it's amazing even what happens there. Doing a lot of those things. And then the latest is we're actually launching our first dinner church next week in a neighboring community at their community center. So you could pray for us for that. We'll see how it goes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the time. This has been really awesome. I have loved getting to know you and your story and what God is doing in and through you, and now at Table Life Church. You guys are in Pennsylvania, you said?
Yeah, we're in Harrisburg, or just right on the other side of the river from Harrisburg.
Okay. All right. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Pastor Kris, thank you so much for your time. And we'll be praying for all of your outreach events and your congregation, and just continuing to create those fresh expressions and being the hands and feet of Jesus.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Thanks for checking out this podcast. I hope this interview was a blessing to you. Like, share, subscribe, and get the word out. And let's indeed follow Jesus everywhere.